On a more somber note, of course, this is a program focused on Georgia elections, the cogs of our democracy, but we also want to extend our prayers to Barrow County, the Appalachian high school community after last week's mass shootings, and open the floor to any of our state leaders here if they have any comments they want to offer today about that shooting. Mayor Franklin, you want to begin?
Well, clearly, we're all stunned and shocked. But the statistics suggest that we have a problem bigger than Barrow County. And I'm not an elected official anymore. I, for one, believe that we need to take steps to correct the problems wherever they are, and that the legislature and the government and the state need to take it seriously. More seriously than is evident right now, but the fact that I don't know what they're doing makes me give them some leeway, but I think the people of Georgia really need to hold our elected officials accountable.
Well, I think without those saying that all of us sympathy at the families of these poor folks in our thoughts and prayers. And a lot of folks are focused on them over the next couple of days. No question there's this is not a North issue. It's a USA issue. I wish we all dealt with the issue at some level in all of our times in public office. It is extremely difficult to legislate an issue like this. One thing that I was very proud of the Georgia legislature in Speaker Lawson's last days really focused on the mental health. It is a major issue in so many tragic situations, and we've never dealt with it. Most of us have, and that's all it's a way, it is an issue that is difficult to legislate. I frankly, I'm very pleased to see that the legislature has enacted the provisions to require parents to be accountable, and we've already seen what's happened over the last couple of days with parents that's not no idea about the action plan, but somebody has to do this is one way that it's good to slow down this training that keeps popping up.
Well, first of all, condolences to the family of those who were surrounding those. Those are hollow words, I'm sure, to those who have lost a loved one. But nonetheless, we should all feel the sorrow associated with their loss. It is one of the most difficult issues that I think our society confronts. I, for one, think that we need to do as much as possible to identify potential issues with young children as much as we can. That requires, in my opinion, that we put more emphasis on having appropriately trained counselors in our schools, and also maybe looking at the possibility of giving greater authority to those who are in responsible positions to take affirmative action when the early signs are presenting themselves. Now, I used to be a juvenile court judge, and when I was a juvenile court judge, one of the greatest frustrations was, first of all, that the schools would always bring truant children to me, but they'd wait until the end of the school year, and I'd say, well, okay, what do you want me to do? You want to send them back to school? Can they pass this year? Oh no, they've passed. They've lost too many hours and too many days. They can't pass. Well, it's too late. Juvenile court can't do anything effectively. The school systems have to be made more aware to act early, but they're afraid to. We've got to give them some degree of protection if they're going to do that. And then secondly, I think we need to have, as I indicated, I think more trained counselors who are closer to the situations to identify these young children if they get in a position where they become potentially a threat. There is no good answer. There is no good answer. It's a community problem. It's a state problem, national problem. It is a family problem. Thank you.
Well, number one, I am, as Senator Chambliss says, I am glad the General Assembly put some responsibility on the parents, particularly this case. This kid had trouble. His daddy knew it because the police officer interrogated him a year ago about it, and then gives him a AR-15 for Christmas. If that's not the height of irresponsibility, I don't know what is. It is difficult. There's no question. And let me tell you something. I'm a life member of the NRA. I went Saturday and went dove hunting. Unsuccessfully, I might point out. But I'm to the point where I just don't see why anybody needs a machine gun. I just be quite frank with you. And everybody says, well, if we ban machine guns, they'll be coming to get your gun in your house. That's foolishness. We all know that's not true. I've got more guns. I got shotguns and everything else, and there's probably a pistol in my gun safe or something else. But I just never have found that I could hit those doves or quail with a machine gun. Now, I just be quite frank with you. I never have tried, but maybe I'll try it next time. I think that we're to the point that we don't need machine guns.
Thank you all for your insight on a subject that's hard for us here in Georgia to shake this morning and across the nation. Thank you for this esteemed panel for being here today. And I want to personally thank you. Every time I called, and while you were in office, all of you made a point to talk to the media. And accessibility, as you know, is so important, especially when it comes to things like elections, voting, and election integrity. And that's what we're here for today. We're here to talk about the Georgia Democracy Defense Project, which may be new to all of you. It was born to restore faith in our democracy and politicians and election integrity. I want to ask all of you, why was it so important for all of you to come together, despite your politics, to form this board and to devise this mission? And Governor Barnes, I'll begin with you, followed by Governor Deal, because we all remember back in 2010, you two were at opposite sides, I think running for something like governor or something like that. And your mission for Georgia was oh so different. But what's changed and why now?
Well, politics has changed. Nathan and I were talking about this just a few minutes ago. Politics has changed than when we first began in it. There was never a question that you accepted the results of an election and that you were going to have a peaceful transfer of power. I don't care where it was, county commissioner or coroner or president of the United States. That has been upset, and there is a large part of the population of this state and of the nation, apparently, that does not have confidence in the electoral system. And all of us believe, I always think politicians, that we on Democrat Republicans, we have a lot more in common than we have that differentiates us. But the thing that we all have in common is elections matter. You should vote, and you should be confident that your vote's going to be accurately counted. And thirdly, that you cannot destroy the confidence that we have in election. I'll tell you this one thing, and then I'll turn it over to Nathan. When I got, in 2002, some of you may remember, I recall it pretty well, I was defeated for re-election. And so this had been the first election that we'd had under a statewide system. Before they had paper ballots here. Easiest thing to defraud there is paper ballots. Paper ballots here, voting machines that you turned and some touch turn, where we had the first uniform system. Diebold won the contract, and it's the one that was just replaced a couple of election terms ago. After the election, this group came to see me and says, they stole that election from you. I said, they did. Says, yes. Says, the president of Diebold, who's a Republican from Ohio, says he came down and said he put a patch on that machine, those machines, the weekend before the election. And you need to know that. I said, well, I'm going to tell you what you need to know. I lost that election all on my own. I said I didn't need any help to lose it. And who would have ever even thought that? Who would have said, well, somebody came in and they fixed the machine? We've got to stop that. And that's the message that we're trying to say, is that on all parties, on all people, except elections, something we never thought we would have to even discuss.
Governor Deal.
Well, I certainly agree with Roy. That is the purpose of us being here today, is to try to do what we can to instill confidence in the election process. The ballot boxes across this country, they connect we the people to the body politic, the government that does what we the people have asked them to do. If that is tampered with in any fashion whatsoever, certainly that has to be dealt with. But false accusations and rumors and things that cause people to lose confidence in the system is a terrible thing to have happen. As I put it to somebody else, I said, well, if you're not going to vote just because somebody has told you that your vote's not going to count, then you've given the opposite side 2 votes. You've given them their vote and you've given them your vote. We have to make sure that the public is confident that what is being done to count their ballots once they have submitted them is being done properly. And that's what the basic purpose of our project here is to try to say, don't be deceived by innuendo, by false accusations. Be sure, and we want to be sure, that the election process is properly conducted.
I registered to vote when I was age 18, and I don't think I've ever failed to vote in an election where I had the opportunity to do so. First presidential race, I voted for Barry Goldwater. Now, me and Barry didn't fare very well back then. So I remember Arizona and Georgia, the only 2 states that he won. But I got to exhibit my my selection of the candidates, and that was important then. On December 15, 2005, Majority Leader Bill Frist was in the Senate then as Majority Leader. He he selected a guy named Joe Biden, which some of y'all have heard from, Lindsey Graham, Maria Cantwell, and myself to go to Iraq and be the official congressional observers of the first democratically held election in the country of Iraq. Some of you may remember that they stuck their thumb into ink to indicate that they had voted. So they didn't vote more than once. And as we were there, we were the bad guys shut down because they knew we were in town. It's the only time I was in Iraq without a flak vest. And we were able to go to polling places. And you talk, I get emotional now. But as we were at those polling places around Iraq, the women, remember, they had never been able to vote before. They were allowed to vote in that election. They brought their children to the polling place, and when you talk to them about it, they would say, this may not ever happen again, but it's happening today, and I want my children to see this. Now, something that we take for granted that those folks did not have. And that just reinforced my my feeling about the fact that when we have the opportunity to vote, that we need to take advantage of it, and we need to have the security that the integrity of our vote is going to count. And that really is what we're about. We've had some issues in Georgia over the last couple of cycles. We've had any number of issues around the country over the last couple of cycles that have sowed some doubt in the minds about whether or not their vote was going to count. And all of us have a lot of experience on different levels. And we think it's important that when everybody votes at every election, that they can know that their vote is going to count and the process is going to have the security and integrity that we have always had in this country. So that's kind of what we're about.
Amen. So my earliest recollections of voting and politics are around the dinner table in my hometown of Philadelphia. I was the only child, only grandchild, and my grandparents and my parents were of different political parties. My grandfather and father were Republicans. My grandmother and my mother were Democrats. So every Sunday dinner was a debate about the Eisenhower-Stevenson election. And I listened. In those days, children were not asked their opinion, and I did not offer one. But I learned in those family dinners the significance and the passion that my ancestors, my parents and grandparents had for politics. I had no idea I would actually run for office, but I understood the value of having rigorous debate, differences of opinion, but being guided by the outcome of the election. We didn't stop the family dinners after Eisenhower won. My grandmother still cooked dinner. They continued to have debates. So this for me goes back a long, long way. And when I was called to join these gentlemen, I readily agreed because unlike Roy, I did not lose an election. I did not lose an election, but I barely won one. My first election for mayor, I won by 50.01% of the vote. And if it had been challenged, and it was challenged, and it was a recount, I lost 3 votes in the recount, but there was never a question as to whether it was fair. And it seems to me that that's fundamental to the democracy. It's fundamental to our values as a country. And it's fundamental to our success as a country. So I joined this group for those reasons.
The most recent HAC poll indicates that faith in elections really hasn't recovered since Donald Trump lost the 2020 vote and continued to repeat the lie that he won. Some 3/4 of Republicans and 1/3 of independents say they believe there is widespread voting fraud. I want to direct this next question to the Republicans on the panel. Senator Chambliss, you first. What should Republicans be doing right now? What should they be messaging to fellow Republicans to counteract these messages that undermine our faith in our democracy?
When you say that, whatever the number was, 75% of Republicans think that there is fraud, well, let me tell you, there is fraud in every election. Now, let's don't kid ourselves about that. The question is what the degree is of fraud, and does it impact the election? I mean, we got 159 counties in Georgia. With those 159 counties, we've got in excess of 3,000 voting precincts in Georgia. Now, if you're going to tell me that 100% of all of those 3,000 voting precincts didn't have some mischief going on, that's going to happen. But the question is it observable? And if it is, had it been rectified? Or is it something that really, on a scale, impacted the election? So I went through 14 elections, about half of them in my district and the other half statewide. And we always made sure that we had the right people at the polling places to make sure that they were looking out for our interest, and that at the end of the day that they could come back to us and say that yes, the election was carried out in the right process and it was fair, and thank goodness, well, I only lost once. That was my first time. But that you did win, and it was carried out exactly like it was intended to be. How can you change the minds of those 75% of Republicans? You're never going to change their minds. What you have to do is to make sure that our election officials at the local level are prepared and trained to what they're supposed to do. And you need to have the right observers in the polling place, both Republican, Democrats, together, looking at in the polling places. And then you obviously you have to have good leadership at the top. And the legislature has made some changes in our voting process over the last several years, and it was criticized, as everybody in this room probably wrote about that change. Well, what happened in the last election? We saw the increase of voting participation to a level that we have never had in our state. So I'm not going to say that there's not any fraud that's going to happen in the 24 election, but we're going to make sure that the people who are supposed to be in the precincts and that they're trained by the folks in the Secretary of State's office that are supposed to be doing that. And at the end of the day, I have no doubt that we can say that if there was any mischief going on in any one of those 3,000 precincts, it did not impact the election.
Can I have Mayor Franklin jump in? As you know, this era of bad information is running rampant in communities of color. There's X, there's Instagram, and mainstream media. What role can you all play in kind of, I don't know, modifying the message so that this bad information is not so overwhelming?
Well, the reason we exist is to speak up and to address the misinformation. And that's what we're attempting to do. Now, I think it's Keith, right? He asked if we'd done this before, and the answer is no. This is the first time the four of us have done this session together. We've been individually on the radio. We've written op-eds. We believe that we bring our credibility to the discussion, and in some ways, we're kind of the finger in the dike. I mean, we're there to say, believe us. You believe us on other things. Believe us. And that we are watching and paying attention. In terms of particular communities, I think the fact that we are different, we have different political parties, but we all believe in the democracy. We may have a different point of view on an issue, but that does not keep us from cooperating. And that does not keep us from speaking up and being, it's up to you to be sure that we're heard. We can't do more than speak up. The issue of, there's a lot of reason for the Black community to be distrustful historically. So we can't deny that. This is a new day in American history after the 1960s. It is a new day. And it's particularly a new day in the American South. And we celebrate that. So we can't deny that there have been problems before, but we have to talk about how they've been rectified and also talk on using the mechanisms that people often use for misinformation, which is often social media. And I post on Instagram. I mostly post about my flowers and garden. But I post about my flowers and garden because I was given advice that if I posted on politics every day, nobody would read it. And that I needed to be diverse in my postings. No, it's true. So I use the mechanisms that I have. And sometimes it works, sometimes it's picked up, sometimes even Greg picks it up. And I would call on all of us here, if you believe as we believe, that fair elections are fundamental to American democracy and America's success, that you use your mechanisms to say that even when you're questioning it. In other words, having some balance in what you present. But we cannot deny the history. and the history lasts a lot longer. We cannot deny the history.
Writing a new newsletter just on azaleas. Right now, there's an ongoing simmering debate, of course, about the election board, and the proposed rules changes that critics say could set the stage for Donald Trump and his supporters to challenge the results again in Georgia should he lose in November. Governor Barnes, I'll ask you this question. Should the rules for an election be set at the beginning of an election year and stay the same, or should there be provisions where they should be modified this close to an election?
I read Governor Deal's comments the other day, and I agree with him 100%. You don't change rules this close to the election. It creates instability. And just as Senator Chambliss talked a little while, you have to train these folks. And the confidence that comes from that there's an adequately trained, if they don't have the rules and can't train them, then how can all you're doing is destroying confidence in it. So yes, they should be set at the beginning so that folks can be trained on them, that people become knowledgeable about it. And I think it's a disservice to try to change them this close to it.
Well, Roy and I certainly agree on that. Back to your first question, though, let me comment about that. You asked what should we as Republicans do about the distrust factor that apparently is showing up in the polls. Well, first of all, three of us on this end are all trial lawyers. We know what it takes when you're a trial lawyer. You've got to find out what the truth is. And sometimes in the political process, it is almost impossible to find out what the truth is, because everybody that is involved in the political process, and you're a good part of this, are you spreading distrust in the system? Are we as Republicans allowing our political party to select people who become the spokespeople for the party position? Are we allowing them to be talking about things that they can't prove? Well, if they are, they're doomed for failure. We shouldn't be neither party should be going into any election with the idea that they're going to explain away the reason they lose by setting it up in advance. Whoever played a basketball game or a football game with that kind of attitude? You can't blame the referees after the game is already over with. If there are things that need to be corrected, speak from truth. Everybody, including the press.
A recent development, Attorney General Chris Carr ruled that Governor Kemp is not required to investigate fellow Republicans on that election board who Democrats have taken issue with. At this point, to clear the air, to instill that confidence that is lacking in so many areas, will you bend the governor's ear a little bit and tell him that he probably needs to push for that and take a deeper dive, so to speak? Governor Barnes.
Let me tell you, there's an old adage that says former governors should be neither seen nor heard. And so I will tell you this. I read this weekend Attorney General Carr's, he's not required to act. I mean, it's completely discretionary with the governor. Attorney General Carr is right on that. But I'm not going to tell him what to do. I didn't like folks telling me what to do, and I'm not going to tell him what to do. So I have great confidence in Governor Kemp. He'll do what is appropriate under the circumstances. And so I'm going to leave it at that.
Governor Deal?
There's even more truth to Roy's original statement that former governors should not be seen or heard. That is especially true if the former governor is of the same political party as the one that you're asking about. And I'm going to take that as my out.
I'm going to ask one last question before we go to you guys.
So I want to say I'm not a former governor,
Yeah.
and I'm not a trial lawyer. But it seems to me, since it's been given, the charge was given to the Attorney General, that there might be some legal matters associated with this, and there could be some legal action. I don't know what it is. I'm not a lawyer, and I certainly don't know the state statutes. But it seems to me that if, in fact, changing the rules this close to an election is a problem, then the problem doesn't go away because you don't act. The problem still exists. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay, my last question before we throw it to the audience. I'll direct this to Senator Chambliss. What do you think happened with the nation's psyche? This is a deep one. In 2020, do you think it was Trump, or do you think it was Donald Trump as a symptom of the deep brokenness of our political system? Do you think that there was already underlying concerns, or do you think Donald Trump kind of came in and took advantage of those underlying concerns?
Well, he certainly amplified the undercurrent, but you have to look back at, gosh, the last 25 years. Our country is pretty much divided 50-50, right down the middle. And thank goodness our forefathers, in writing the Constitution, put the Electoral College in place to allow the people who, in the bigger states, at least they have more votes, but the smaller states are going to have a say-so anyway. And even though we have been 50-50 down the middle on virtually every presidential election in the last 25 years, there has been an undercurrent on both sides of the aisle and whether it's caused by folks on the far right or the far left beating up the candidates and telling them that, look, you need to go after the other side in this election because I don't know whether that's what it is or what it's been. But clearly in the 2000 election, the presidential election, we all remember the hanging chads, and we all got educated on what a BlackBerry was in the aftermath of that. And from that election forward, there has been disagreement and really amplification of the angst against whoever won. And I don't know what is the cause of 2020. Donald Trump didn't help himself, and he lost every legal battle that he had as a result of that election. And I hope that all of these folks who are now saying that, well, we're going to lay the ground now for the litigation to go forward, they need to go back and read some of those cases that happened. Mm-hmm. Some of the written decisions that were made after 2020 are pretty strong language given by judges about whether or not these folks ought to have done what they did by filing a lawsuit. But I don't think it was necessarily Donald Trump. I think he happened to be just the latest in the group. There are two unsung heroes that we don't talk about much. One's Richard Nixon, and the other one's Al Gore. In 1960, there was allegations that were properly provable that there'd been some hanky-panky in Chicago. And that was the closest election we've ever had, was the 1960 election. But Richard Nixon, to his credit, said, I will concede defeat because it would tear the country apart. Now, in 2000, it came down to, I think, 476 votes, something like that, in Florida. Can you imagine, just imagine this, that where the Donald Trump would have accepted an election and there'd only been 476 votes that separated him from the presidency. Al Gore, we owe a debt of gratitude. I reread his both of their statements over the weekend just to kind of refresh my recollection about it. And both of them said, you have to put the country over party. And that is the message that we try to carry out and that we want to say is the health of the nation, this grand experiment that we don't know is going to last or not, is the most important, not a party.
Thank you all. Give them a round of applause this morning. We're going to now open up the floor to questions and answers. And raise your hand if you have a question, and Julia will find you.
Yes, we talked a little bit about the state election board. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what you view as the proper role of that body and what you think the proper role for the members of that board to have are in terms of partisanship. Yes, the state election board.
I got it. I'll say this. I didn't see anything wrong with the old board. I'd be quite frank with you. You had the Secretary of State that was chair. The governor had 2 appointments, and each party had had 1 appointment. What was wrong with that? I mean, you know, so there is some argument that, you know, everybody ought to be nonpartisan. I don't know if you could find 5 nonpartisan people in Georgia to serve there. So I think the old system worked pretty good. And I think this, and listen, I did it. I started it when I was governor, letting, you know, in the log rolling that occurs, I let the speaker and the lieutenant governor have some appointments on some board. And that was the worst mistake I ever made in my life. Now, I'll just be quite frank with you. Yeah, that's right. Like Zell Miller giving appointment authority to the Senate. But anyway, I think you need somebody who's elected and has to build consensus to be making those appointments. And listen, Brad Raffensperger has done an admirable job. Now that'll probably get him beat next time because I said that. So I disagree with him in a lot of things, but he is the Secretary of State. And why they said that he couldn't be chairman of the Board of Elections, which he oversees the elections, is beyond me. So what I would do would go back to the old system. Man.
Thank you all. My name is David Cross. I'm the 2nd vice chair for the Georgia GOP. I want you to know that civilized nations like Australia, Finland, Germany, France, Spain, the Netherlands, Norway, Australia, all use paper ballots, hand-counted paper ballots. There was the election.
Yeah, with the fingerprint, you in favor of that?
Absolutely. Do you know why the fingerprint is on there, sir? It was to make that nobody voted twice. It was evidence.
I'm asking you, are you in favor of the fingerprint being put on a paper ballot? That's the question I have for you. Yeah, I see. I'm listening.
I've not seen any of you at the state election board meetings. Of the complaints. I know that none of you understand that 3,000 ballots were found to have been double scanned and double counted in Fulton County. Fulton County had 150, they had 150 violations of election code. Each one is worthy of. Question is again, why would you want to have your name attached to this particular organization, this particular group, all right? What strikes me is I'm getting to it. There were 51 people. There were 51 people that attached their name to from the intelligence community saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was not real, that it was Russian disinformation.
Listen.
It turns out it was. Please stop interrupting me.
No, sir. Quit using everybody else's time.
Why are you doing this when none of you have any expertise at all in election security? Why do you put your good name on here?
Let me answer that. You're part of the problem, not part of the solution. Now, I will tell you that. That's number one. Number two is I remember paper ballots. You don't. Hush, let me finish. And let me tell you something. The easiest thing to fake, well, you just said that Fulton County and they had cameras on them and they couldn't do it. All right, hush, let me finish. The easiest thing for somebody to steal is an election on a paper ballot. Let's put it up to a vote.
We're gonna one more question. We're gonna have to wrap up.
I don't need a mic. I'm Emery Morseberger from Gwinnett. My first election that I was involved in was 1960 in Baltimore County, Maryland, against Spiro Agnew. Anybody remember him? We knew he was a swindler, but it took 10 years to nail him. My question, what happens the day after the election when a couple county election boards refuse to certify their elections and possibly throw the Georgia election process into chaos with the objective of throwing the election into the U.S. Congress? What is your plan for that day after? Hopefully I'm way out in left field and it never happens. But what do you plan to do to help keep us on track?
I'll take a shot at that. Number one, thank you for all those ties that you gave me over the years. I still wear them, I promise you. Well, you know, our function, as I said earlier, is not to look over the shoulder of the folks in the precincts. What we want to establish to impact those 74 Republicans and 41 Democrat percents, whatever it is, folks out there can know that when they go in the ballot box, that their vote is going to be legally counted. And you know, when it happens, when something happens at the end of the day, we have some control of that, some control we do not have. That's why we have the courts. We went through that in 2020. We're seeing litigation pre-election this year, and we're going to probably see some after the election. But last time around, I think the courts got it right. I was very vocal at the end of 2020 that the Secretary of State did nothing wrong, and the election was valid, and it should have been ended on election night. But we're a country of laws, and you have a right to file a lawsuit if you don't think the election was right. And I do expect that that may happen. But Emory, we got a process to get to the election. We're trying to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure that the integrity and the security of that process is guaranteed. There's also a process after elections that hopefully will be short-lived.
I hate to do this, but I've got to go sue somebody. I've got to be in court.
I want to thank the panel, Governor Barnes.
I was going to ask Senator Chambliss, you were the only one who didn't respond to the election board question. And with this vital election happening in November, with the nervousness out there, particularly with the maneuverings of the election board, do you think Governor Kemp needs to step in at this point?
As Roy said, there's an old adage, former senators are not to be heard or seen in the Capitol. I have all the confidence in the world about Governor Kemp. He has been down a rough road getting elected twice as governor. And he has taken more arrows, I dare say, by his own party than any other candidate that I've ever known. And he has done the right thing every time in spite of getting those arrows fired at him. I assure you that he is really concerned about the issue that you raise. He has gone to the point of being public about the fact that he's asked the AG to inquire about the ethics issue and what he can and what he can't do. Now that AG Carr has given his opinion, I suspect that the governor over the weekend was huddling with his lieutenants again to say, okay, we've got this decision. What can we do next? Should he, he can't do anything other than what the law allows. So I'm very confident about the fact that he is bothered by this situation, or he would not have asked the AG to look into this. And I'm sure that now that opinion has come out that he is still concerned about it, and he's thinking about what he can do legally.
Great. Governor Deal, Senator Chambliss, Mayor Franklin, Greg, Lisa, thanks to our title sponsor, Georgia Power, and thank all you guys for coming out this morning. Got the week off to a great start, and we hope to see you again at a press club event, the Hall of Fame on October 28th, and the debates on October 13th, which will be streamed live on GPB. So have a great week.